kind of like Webster Cantrell, if you know what that place is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when I was there,
All
working
of
with
them
all
know.
the teenagers, like they all thought I was 45, like the whole time. And this was like 5
He
years
said
ago.
it'll be about 15. He's breaking stuff down. It should take him about 15 minutes. And we'll head.
Yeah, I think we're probably.
Yeah, because he might be a little bit. So, all right. So my name is Demario Phillips. I live here in Decatur, Illinois. I'm a corrections officer. And yeah, we're here to talk about, some of the recent events that's going on in America. So I'll have some of you guys introduce yourself.
My name is TJ Hahn. I'm pastor at Riverside, which is actually this church. And I've been involved with youth ministry before that for many years. Know Mario, and we just decided it would be good to get together and talk about some of the issues that we see in our culture with just the race issues, the police, the response, the protests, and how does the gospel relate to that? And in a way that we seek understanding from one another and learn from one another. We talk openly with one another, because what we see on the internet a lot of times is just like conversations of the deaf, where people are just, constantly just trying to get people to hear and scream at people and to hear what they're saying. So we want to show like we can talk about this stuff and learn from one another, So
Amen.
yeah.
All right, my name's Jared Bohland. I've known Mario for some years doing anti-human trafficking work. Kind of have my feet in two different pools at any given point. I'm a client services coordinator for Dove Inc.'s domestic violence program, but then I've also been doing Man Up Men's Ministry, both in churches and now mostly like multi-platform online for years at this point. So kind of always balancing the aspects of being like holy in a faith-centered gospel message type field, and then at the same time being in the social justice world, which doesn't necessarily lean in a more conservative faith-based model. So kind of always looking at the dynamics of both.
Yeah, I'm Stephawn Woodley. I know Mario forever almost. Been living in Chicago, and I've been pretty much a technician working on cars, and has experienced a lot of firsthand of what happened in Chicago, and just personally experienced a lot of what's been going on, and personally can be invested in how people can feel, and then just want to be able to see how everybody else think, and we can talk about it vocally and get everybody else to understand how we feel and channel the conversation to a positive direction.
Amen. Yeah. Then we got Jameson Wheeler. He's going to be coming a little later, introduce himself. So I'll kind of introduce him for you guys. Jameson Wheeler is the pastor at Abundant Faith Church here in Decatur. I've known Jameson for a number of years, since high school. He's good people, and he hopefully he'll be here for a good chunk of it. But TJ, what are your initial thoughts about the death of George Floyd?
So, and every time this happens, and when I say every time, I mean a black guy killed by a white cop. My heart sinks. I hate that someone died, obviously. I just think, like, how much is this going to affect our culture? That's the first thing that I think. My goodness, like now, this is definitely going to blow up. And I always think, like, man, what is with the cops? Like, don't they realize that this cannot happen ever? They should be training like hardcore to make sure that this doesn't happen. And I called a buddy of mine who's actually a policeman in Chicago and teaches in the academy, talked to him about it to get his perspective. And he said, man, he's like, I watched the whole video. He said it was excruciating, 8 minutes, 40 seconds or whatever it was. He said, it is a long time. And he said that policeman was 100%, guilty and should be charged, and there's no question, And he said we trained completely away with that. Like, once those cuffs were on him, he should have been off the ground. Let alone not have someone's knee on his neck for that long. He said what I saw from the video and the posture of the policeman and how he was handling it was a lot of anger. Just and like even just anger, but also like I don't care about this guy at all. Is what he said. And then he talked about the other policemen who are also trained to not, when they see like excessive force by their fellow policemen, that they are to stop it. So that should have happened as well. So those guys are also guilty. Now, I would think not in the same way as guilty as this guy, because sometimes people are afraid they can just be more cowardly. They may not want to hurt somebody or kill somebody, but they can be more cowardly and not doing anything about it. He should have stopped him, when they heard him, say he can't breathe. And so he mentioned that. But my heart sinks, and I just think, oh my goodness, this is going to devastate our culture, our community. People are gonna, it's gonna be the policemen are racist. We've got a real problem, and we do have a problem. But from my perspective, and I would love to hear what you guys think about this, because I really just want to share my perspective, and it could be wrong. I think this is the perspective of a lot of, I think, white people. Is that, okay, guys, there's not as big of a problem as the media tends to make it out to be. In that, and I know that is not popular today because everybody's ticked off.
Right.
Everybody's ticked off, and everybody's ready to say, we're going to do whatever it takes, protests and even riots. It's getting just crazy out there. And my initial reaction is go, oh no, this is going to make it look worse because every policeman I know, and from my own experience, every policeman I know is not racist and is kind and it wants to just do their job and protect their community. And that's every policeman I know. I haven't seen any racial prejudice by policemen, but I've talked to my brothers, and Jameson was one of them just recently, where he has experienced this, and he told me about instances that happen, and I'm hearing him and I'm listening, and my heart breaks for him in that this happens. So I'm kind of taking it all in. I recognize that, like, okay, this is a horrible, evil thing that happened, but then I also hear from the other side, you've got like the stats that more white people are killed by policemen than black people. So you go, is this, like, that policeman, was it a race issue? Or was he just an angry cop? I don't know, at least from what I've seen, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but from what I've seen, I haven't seen any, like, solid truth that this guy was obviously a racist. And I'm thinking, well, what if everybody is saying this is a white versus black issue, and the media makes it out that way, and the media, that explodes, and they make money off of it. And that makes me, automatically, I'm distrusting of that. Okay. Right. And I go, what if this actually isn't even a race issue? What if this is a policeman that just has a very bad temper? And because white people are killed too, unarmed white people, but you never hear about it, And so that's where I think that from the typical white kind of outlook, it's that way. Now, when I hear from my black brothers, I'm like, you know what? We are blind to some things. And we're not seeing certain things, and we need to have our eyes open, and we need to have compassion. So, I think there's all that kind of together. There's some tension there because of that. So, I personally, I had someone actually reach out to me and say, "Why have you not posted your outrage against this?" And I was like, so from my perspective, I see this happen, and I go, "This is horrible." And now it's going to blow up, and there's going to be hysteria, and there's going to be all these. So I don't know if I want to encourage that. I don't know if I want to encourage. Yes, it's wrong, completely wrong. Right. And maybe I'm wrong in not posting about it and not demanding there be justice here. But my concern is that it's going to look like I'm going to be encouraging the hysteria that this really is a race issue, and it's going to make it even worse. Because the more it gets shared, the more people get ticked off about it. Maybe people need to get ticked off about it. So that's kind of how I think I kind of react to it. I go, oh no, please, like, why does this have to, like, I almost, one time when, like, this was after the Missouri thing, shooting happened in Missouri.
Michael Brown.
Ferguson.
Okay. Yes. It's after that. There was another one that happened after that. And the first thing that came to my mind, please let it be a white person. That was the first thing that came to mind. Because I'm like, if it's a black person, it's going to become this big thing. And then people are going to think white people are more racist. And my own experience with racism is I was working at a gas station, and this guy comes up to me, and he gives me a $100 bill, black guy. Every time anybody gave us a $100 bill, we had to check it and make sure it was legit. Well, for some reason, the guy thought that I was racist towards him because I didn't think he could have a $100 bill, and I was, making sure that it was right. And so he started making a big scene and just said, "You're ignorant, you're racist, you're ignorant," and he got so mad at me, and all these people are looking, and I'm like, they don't even know what happened. They're just seeing this guy, and I've always been taught, don't you ever look down on anybody for the color of their skin. And my parents are missionaries, and I want to see black people be successful. Like it's encouraging to me. I love that. I love being good friends with black people. They're funny. They got more they're just a little more charismatic, I think, for the most part. And I love being around them. So when I got accused by this guy of being racist, I was so upset about it. It kind of wrecked my whole day. And I was like, man, what was up with that? And so when I see something like this happen, I think, oh no, people are going to think we're even more racist now. And there's going to be that we're all going to be on edge that, what if I do something and somebody thinks I'm racist for it when I'm really not? Right. So that's kind of what goes to my mind. And I think that goes through a lot of people, like friends that I've talked to, like my cousin, I was just talking to him today, and he said the same kind of things. So.
Jared, what about you, brother?
All right. So thinking about this, I'm going to preface probably the whole night with saying, one, I'm super analytical and logical. So I tend to pick things apart instead of jumping into a conclusion because I want to know okay, what was going on here, so on and so forth. I might have a general feeling about any one of these types of scenarios that spring up just by watching those first events. But I've also learned that we're so guarded from so many of the facts in any situation for so long that rushing to judgment, in any area of my life, seems to bite me in the butt. So I tend to take my sweet time. The other catch is, even though I'm working in social justice, doing social work and that sort of thing, my wife was a cop for 8 years. And she's still a forensic interviewer. So I've also been wholly immersed in that life. I understand in a deep way what it was like for her to go to work day in and day out, the effect that it had on her, the level of, one thing I always explained was actually it wasn't even 8 hours a day, it was 10 hours a day because of their shifts. She saw nothing but the worst of the worst, just nonstop for 10 hours, every shift, every week. And that affects you, that builds on you. There's almost a trauma in that because you're purposefully exposing yourself to that kind of thing. So all that being said, when these types of situations spring up, I'm immediately getting a general read on the situation. I think that because of the work I've done, I've been forced to get a better social justice perspective than being a white dude and raised in a certain level of privilege is granted me. So it's more stuff I've had to learn over the years. And at the same time, I'm very sensitive to the potential issues on the other side of the equation. And like I said, I'm also a little bit of a nerd, so I'm just picking apart and refusing to answer for a minute because I just don't know. One thing I really struggle with is videos that stop and start in the middle of a conflict. What happened before, what happened after, without making any judgment calls on anybody in the scenario whatsoever. I already feel like I'm missing something. That being said, this one was different. And I think it's because it was such a long video, 8 minutes or whatever is a really long video if you think about it. And it was such a one-sided deal for me because there's usually a lot of discrepancy that we're chewing apart and trying to figure out well, why did that happen and what was up with this and a lot of question marks. Whereas this to me was just kind of an arrogant, almost white cop who had his knee in a place it didn't have to be for so long. And there was no stress, in my opinion, like watching him. He was hearing what was going on around him. He was hearing what, I almost blanked on his name, George Floyd was saying. He was hearing what the onlookers were saying. He responded at one point rather like even keeled, which is worrisome when somebody's doing something that violent and is also like cool about it. Like that's worrisome. And so when I looked at this, even from the surface level, essentially what I felt like I could say was, this was wrong. It's murder. There were so many things that could have gone differently by choice. And no matter what George was doing before, I don't like at that point, I felt like I could safely say, if he did need arrested, at this point, I don't know. And it doesn't matter. Because what I see is a guy who is on the ground, belly down, handcuffs. 4 cops present. They have utter control at this point. And one thing that I think that is a justifiable response when it comes to police is that they have a certain level of privilege or force that they're granted by their badge and by their weapon. So when you have 4 cops who have gained control of a situation, they have the badge, they have the weapon, they have all of that on their side. And he's just persistent with that damaging behavior, just like, rocking. And I don't know if like you guys noticed it, but like, I think that's what bothered me. Like when I look about the gruesomeness of it, like him rocking on his neck is what really like kind of made me cringe a little bit. And I'm not a cringy person. And so I guess that was like my initial take is like, regardless of what he did, regardless, and that stuff's coming out, regardless of what was going on there, it has no bearing whatsoever on his actions. And they were super intentional. They were, and I say intentional in that like, he could have been doing something wrong for 2 minutes and then backed off. And it still would have been 2 minutes of like, that was totally inappropriate. To carry on for that long is just an aggressive act. So all that being said, and for what it's worth, like I was super relieved that there was almost universal acceptance that like this guy was wrong, it was murder. Like nobody's questioning that. And that's good. Like that's what we want in a just world is for people to watch something like that and say,
just wrong.
Nope, it's wrong. You're right. Like he needs to be dealt with. He probably needs to be charged. He probably needs to go to prison. All of that, like before we even have to tear into it much, like everybody in the world, didn't matter what race they were, didn't matter if they were police or not or whatever, like pretty well universally, there was more or less immediate action. And I think there's always a desire to like, when we say immediate action, like people would like them in prison, like within 8 hours, which may or may not be realistic. But all things considered, like that was handled within like 48 hours. Like, we had people arrested in prison, like moving on charges, the whole bit, which is quick, relatively considering. So that part gave me a little bit of peace, but at the same time, like, so let's like talking about what you said, there's also that immediate like, oh boy, like we know what's coming. This is going to be rocky waters. There's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of historical context that comes into this, whether we like it or not. And one of the things that, and we'll probably get into that tonight, is that I can't speak to me, white dude, white cop killing a black guy, totally wrong, unacceptable, totally intentional, also has no bearing on my history. So I have no context there. I can mourn to some level, I can be sympathetic to some level, but at the same time, I don't know what it's like to be black and in America and have a history with police, or even if you don't have a history with police necessarily, like there's still the greater context that whether we like it or not, it's related. And who knows, like maybe he wasn't racist. Maybe he was just a dirtbag and an evil guy.
Or they just lost it.
But can I say that for sure? And can I say it looks like a whole lot of other bad stuff and it doesn't count? I can't. I can't say that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, man. So yeah, if you guys were to ask my initial thoughts about George Floyd's death, there's a lot of things that come to mind right off the bat. One of them is just the hatred behind it. I watched the video and it was actually hard to watch, not just to see that happen for that long. And people were saying, man, he's and when he was unconscious, he was still on his neck.
Yeah.
That part was tough for me, and people was trying to rush and get the officer off of him, and the other officer stepped in to prevent the people from getting to him. And one thing that kind of ran through my mind, there's very few situations where I'll put myself in danger being a father and a husband. Man, I might have took a bullet. And it's just a scary thought. When you see that going on. So, and then instantly what comes to my heart is this sadness. And when I first saw it, it was rough to see, and then like after some time, I just became sad about it because, George is just like us, a human being made in the image of God. And if any other person look at a person like that, someone that's underneath their knee, and taking their life is no different than arresting someone for speeding through a light, that it's, saddens me, and then also scares me as well. So, I haven't had like any bad experience with police officers personally. I've had, good experience, but that's not to say that, I may just get that one cop one day who's just in a bad mood, and I don't know, he goes way beyond his limit. So, that's always a fear that's in the back of my mind. And also, I think about my sons, this could be something that happens in their generation, and, when they're young and I guess dumb for lack of a better term, and they may say something out of anger. How would that officer in a position of authority respond? That concerns me. I mean, yeah, sure, my boys are super young, but it's still a thought in the back of my mind. So initially, there's some fear there. Again, I haven't had a bad experience, and I'm grateful for that, but there's still fear there, what I mean? And then also just the sadness because it was just so calloused, and I understand being angry, and he could have had words with George. I don't know. We don't know what led up to it, and I personally don't, I don't know what was in the officer's heart during the time he committed it. I can't just hop and say that it's racism, but I do know from the look on his face, it was definitely pride. I mean, people was telling him, hey, get off of him. And he started pressing harder.
Stubborn, controlling behavior.
Exactly. And like, you can watch videos on YouTube, people getting road rage, and it's just an act of rage. And I know all the show illustration helped it make sense. There was this news story happened a couple years ago. This guy, he was driving, these two young kids cut him off in the truck. They didn't know they cut him off. Guy was like right behind them, and they were trying to lose him. They went home. The guy got out of his car, and approached the two young men, and the girlfriend was in the back of the car just recording the whole thing. And they start beating up the guy. They beat him up pretty bad, and one of the guys stopped. He saw the guy's daughter in the back seat, so he stopped, and his friend stopped, and they were just going to leave it as it is. And the guy who got beat up, his wife came out with a firearm, and as he cocked it, the shot went off, and like the look on his face was just like he was he had that crazed look on his face, you know, and he just went back in the car and left. They called the police. 20 minutes later, he came and bashed out their window. I say all this to say this: at the end of the story, when they was talking about it, they mentioned that guy had no record whatsoever, no run-ins with the law at all.
Man.
That one bit of rage, you know, that one fit of rage set him off. I don't know if he had a bad day. So with that officer, you know, again, they said he had a record, you know. You know, sometimes when people get angry and do stuff, sometimes it goes unchecked. Yeah, you know, okay, we did our job, everything's cool. You know, we don't have to shell out money to protect these officers.
Yeah.
You know, it's a greed behind it, and there's, you know, a sense of pride behind it. And you have this, I'm trying to think of a term, for lack of a better term, this negative morale. Well, I'm gonna cover up your stuff, you cover up mine, and they're not being objective to the law, you know, because the law is there to exercise, but, you know, unfortunately, you know, people in positions of power choose to use the law when it's convenient for them, and when it's inconvenient, they just kind of set it aside. That what bothers me the most, you know, the ignorance that's behind it. So, I mean, overall, I mean, you know, I'm saddened by it, and there's a little bit of fear, not only with the police officers, but also with some of the riots. It has calmed down.
Yeah.
But, you know, even talks of that, and I'm not anti-protest by any means, but I just feel like people are so enraged. It's just going
The
crazy.
anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God, right?
Yep.
And that goes across the board for every no matter what you look like.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, you know, Cain killed Abel, and that didn't take long. I mean,
Yeah.
Imagine killing your own brother. You know, that's
out
just
of a
sad.
jealous rage. Yeah.
So, Stephawn,
Man.
what you got, man?
Hey. Well, I'm not as long-winded, but I do have some input on it,
Okay.
which actually, I actually haven't had a lot to say about it for a long time since it started. Hands are sweating is my first time actually talking about it, because when I was watching it was hard for me to watch. I watched it in pieces. I actually finally got done watching it. It was hard to watch. So mainly because I was basically seeing myself on the ground. It could be just one random, if I was still drinking, I'll have one random night I was out, if I was still drinking, just that would have been me. You know, that's all I seen. It was hard for me just to imagine anything else. But reason why, and then another thing that was a problem, because it's just like now I'm just so numb to hearing that there's another situation. I'm just like, again, you know, I'm just kind of numb to it now. I'm not as enraged. I'm not sad. It's kind of again. So and I know there's statistics about showing there's black and white people issues with the numbers of encounters with the police, but I feel like the brotherhood situation with the police, of the training there, like if you sign up to be a police officer, there has to be a mental installment of who you're going to deal with. Like if you're a bouncer at the club, you know, you're signing up to, you know, interact with some, you know, people that might not act normal. So it just has to be a certain understanding. And like I said, it's just it's a culture deal. That's an issue with the policing system, and that everybody feels it. And like I said, I was in Chicago with the whole protest not too long ago. I left before the riot, obviously. But when it early in the day, and it was just actually kind of peaceful to just see with all the different cultures, Mexicans, Latinos, and white, black, and you know, even the Asian community was out there. Just everybody just fed up with it. And I was just amazed. I was sitting there just seeing everybody there just voicing their opinion, how they feel. Because at this point, we all just want to be heard. There's a community structure that needs to be fixed. You know, and it's just not for just black people. I mean, we feel it kind of heavy at the most part because it's more subtle. We sitting there and feel it for so long. That's why there's such an outcry for it. You know, you might hear it more often. My intentions with the question was just mainly I just kind of started to get numb. It was kind of hard for me to react, you know, when I first feel or seen an issue that came up similar to it. So that was kind of painful to try to stick to the same question. Just kind of what my thoughts about it. It's just I could just see myself on that ground. And I have two kids, and you know, they want it. I love my daughters to death. everywhere they go, they ask, "Where's that?" You know, so I'm just seeing myself like, well, he's not here anymore.
Yeah.
Because some angry cop, and you can't be at your job of employment, get angry. You know, you got to keep a mentality of how you're at your job workplace. You have to keep a certain attitude. And it's just, it was hard for me to watch it. It was hard for me to actually voice it too, because I was like, it just.
And with the numbness, I definitely understand where you're coming from. Because when I first saw it, it was kind of like, man, you know, and it didn't really hit me until I really like just thought about it, and you know, and I always try to place myself in other people's shoes. So I definitely know where you're coming from on that, and I think you know, anybody can have that empathy. I think, you know, with the context being shifted towards race, I mean, it could have been based on race. I don't know, but whether, you know, yeah, you can look at the stats or you can look at the narrative, but the principle of the matter is a person of authority killed another human being on duty. And you know, that's just not right. You know, no matter how you want to phrase it. I mean, some people have a preference on how they want to phrase it. You know, that's not the issue. The issue is, you know, someone in a position of authority that's been hired to protect and serve, you know, is killing someone because they feel like they're lower than them. You know, and that's, I think that's, that's why people are, you know, enraged.
Yeah, for sure.
I had one other thought, and this kind of comes from my work in the domestic violence field, but I feel like it's an obvious crossover that gets overlooked a lot. So in domestic violence, when we're looking at perpetrators, we look at the fact that the need for power and control is essentially at the root of all the abusive tactics. So there's like verbal abuse, there's physical abuse, there's all this stuff that happens that people see or experience, but behind all of it, there's the general motive of either maintaining or building power and control. And in this case, like, it was such an obvious bridge for me, because essentially you see somebody who already has a lot of power and control because, again, they've got a weapon granted to them. They have a badge that people have to respect, in the uniform that people have to respect. We talk about the fact that, like, you had people on the sidelines who, if it's not a uniform and a badge and a gun, they're stepping in, right? Like, without question. But because that's on the table, it's different. Despite him having all of that power and authority over the situation already, you see somebody who was willing to essentially squash the life out of somebody to maintain it. And so, like, in domestic violence, one of the things that I look at, and I talk about lethality with survivors and how dangerous a situation might be, to me, shooting somebody is significantly less aggressive and violent, as weird as this sounds, than strangling somebody. Because shooting somebody happens in like a second.
Right.
You have the means in your hand. Sure, you went about getting the means and all of that, but at the end of the day, like, an impulse with a deadly weapon can turn into a deadly situation. But with strangling, with like essentially squishing or choking the life out of somebody, you have to choose. With domestic violence, strangulation is super common. And you're choosing to wrap your hands around somebody's neck, specifically, nowhere else in the body, and squeeze to cut off blood or air until you gain even more control over that situation. And you have this cop who, like, this is the sadistic part of this particular act, is he had control. There wasn't a fight going on, and yet for 8 minutes, he didn't, like, get angry and just shoot, right? He chose to continue apply pressure in a way that everybody hearing from him and the outsiders and everybody else saying, like, this guy cannot breathe. And yet he continued. And the equivalent of that is, in fact, intentionally putting your hands around somebody's neck and squeezing until you get the desired outcome. It's just so much worse.
It almost makes you wonder, like, how could he do that? But I something that comes to my mind is someone who's controlling, someone who likes that power and perverts that power, cannot stand the videotaping and the yelling and the get off his neck. Oh, I'll prove you I'm not getting off his neck. You know, it's kind of like, I wonder if that was what was going through his head, in that he's like, I'm sick and tired of these people pointing these video cameras at me, trying to make me look bad. I'm going to show them that I can do whatever I want, and they can't tell me what to do. Almost like that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think I've seen that in people in the midst of this whole mess. Okay, I've seen that because the gospel, I'm kind of getting ahead here, but the gospel says that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Mm-hmm. And so here's the scary thing. There's a little bit of that in all of us.
Yeah. And
if we give it gas, if we let it have its way, it could do some pretty ugly stuff. Mm-hmm. Like we don't like to have people tell us what to do, or to people tell us we're wrong, or people correct us. I mean, I've seen that even just recently on Facebook and in Messenger and all this stuff. Like, some people will dig their heels in, and they will not. And the more that you try to prove that they don't care, mm-hmm. they will not listen, and they will do everything in their power, and they'll get ugly and attack you personally.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's when it gets really ugly, when somebody starts attacking. And that's what we see going on social media. So the question is, how does it apply to us? And I would say that we need to all recognize that we have sin in us, and that we can easily be like that even. Maybe we're not going to kill somebody, but Jesus said, remember, if you have hate in your heart towards someone, you mm-hmm. murdered them. Yep. And we got a lot of hate going on around the internet. I mean, people are like, they can't stand to be told that they're wrong, so they're just going to personally attack you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, and I feel like that's the reason why people don't like to just get into these type of discussions, mm-hmm. online. Sometimes even in person, either A, it gets way out of hand, or B, people tend to make light of it and jokingly mm-hmm. say things, and mm-hmm. just try to gloss over it,
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to pass, mm-hmm. Time's going to go on, 2020 has been a crazy year.
Yeah.
And, it started off Kobe Bryant dying, and no one's even thinking about Kobe Bryant. You know what I mean? So you got to imagine 1 or 2 years from now, this is all going to be forgotten about. Mm-hmm. But, I don't say that to mitigate what's at hand, but what I'm saying is we have to step back, mm-hmm. take a breath, and be wise with our words, and mm-hmm. realize that we have to exercise restraint in what we say, because we mm-hmm. can just create more of a divide,
mm-hmm.
and
mm-hmm.
and I can tell, TJ, you really wanted to have this conversation to build that bridge, and I was all for doing it,
mm-hmm.
and this is a hard conversation for people to have, because mm-hmm. again, someone may disagree with mm-hmm. your view or take. That's fine. We can disagree and
mm-hmm.
still get along. But if our disagreements divide us,
mm-hmm.
If we can't be in the same room,
mm-hmm.
if we can't eat at the same table,
mm-hmm.
We're enemies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's as plain as that. We're enemies. Scripture calls us, especially as Christians, to always reconcile, to bridge. Now, you can't force a person to reconcile with you. You can't force them to be peaceful with you, but we're called to build that bridge as mm-hmm. believers,
mm-hmm.
So we're running out of time. So I'm just gonna, these last two questions, let's try to breeze through them. So the next question is, again, we're just breezing through them. TJ, do you believe that the protests are effective?
Now, do you mean by is it the
not riots,
peaceful protests or the riots?
Peaceful protests. We know riots aren't effective.
Riots aren't effective.
Yeah.
Some people
That's
would.
good.
I mean, I've been talking to people.
Oh yeah, I know.
On friends' posts or whatever, that they think the riots are effective, and that's what's even more scary.
Right.
And I think whenever something happens now, if people think that, then it's going to be okay. Let's riot. We can get what we want.
Right.
So that's scary to me. I think that's what's more scary. I think the protests are being effective because we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
We're listening.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to Jameson really kind of opened up my eyes even more.
Mm-hmm.
Because I go, how much race? Because bro, all of my friends, none of my friends are racist. I've run across one guy who said he was a part of a white supremacy group, a KKK group,
mm-hmm.
in Nazis. They had the Nazi flag and everything in South Carolina. And he started talking about, it was like crazy. I could go on and on about this, but I was like, I can't believe that I'm talking to somebody who actually is a part of this. Like, this is actually happening.
Right.
So there is some of that extremism, but I mean, anybody I know isn't like that. So I go, I'm kind of blind to the fact that there is some racial profiling, degrading, looking down on someone, for just how the color of their skin. I think we do it with all Christians are hypocrites. All Muslims are jihadists. All black people are gangsters or whatever.
Right.
All white people are snobby, whatever.
Right.
They don't. I don't know. Like, what are the stereotypes for white people? What are some of the stereotypes?
They always wear New Balance. No.
They're sheltered. They're
Right.
ignorant. That kind of thing.
Right.
So you have all these stereotypes out there, and I think that when we come together, when we talk, I heard Darius. I wish Darius could have been here. He's in Texas. I remember him saying this. He said, if all the people that you hang around look like you, talk like you, which talk about the same kind of stuff, think like you, believe like you, then is it really others that you love, or is it you that you love? And I was like, dang, that's heavy. Because we should be around people that are different than us, and if we have compassion for others, we should want to learn from other people. And I mean, growing up on the mission field when I was a kid, I learned that you can be friends with just people that even speak a different language than you.
Right.
You can be such good friends with these people, playing soccer with these kids. And so I want to know, I want to learn, and I've learned a lot from that. So the protesting, I think, has done that. It's caused people to go, this is an issue. And when people see massive groups of protesters peacefully doing it, they're like, something's going on.
Yeah.
And
I
it
think
gets
you
them
brushed up with them earlier in Chicago.
It gets them talking,
Yeah.
And now the Colin Kaepernick thing, that's a whole other thing that comes into this. And from this is another perspective I want to share. The white perspective on that is, and I think even some of my black friends, they have the same perspective. That is disrespectful. It's wrong for him to do that. I'm just telling you that's what's out there. And the reason why, people always go, why? He's peacefully protesting an injustice in society. And the reason why they have a problem with that is because he's a rich guy making a lot of money playing a sport, and the country that he lives in is what gives him the freedom to do that. We have a great country, and people that work very hard to barely make it. Look at this guy who's making. They would love to be in that position, and he's kneeling during the national anthem. And they're like, oh, that ticks me off. So people get ticked off about that. And I understand that. I understand that side. But I think that we need to stop and go, you know what, though? We live in America where he has a right to do that. Whether you disagree with it or not, let's not make a big, huge issue out of it. Because, I saw so much hatred going towards Colin Kaepernick and anybody who might think that he's a good guy. And it's like, let's just stop. Let's just listen.
Yeah.
And let's not, point the finger so much at this guy. I think the other side needs to understand where this side's coming from, why they don't like it. I can understand that.
Right.
And there's been times where I'm like, yeah, that is stupid. I don't like how he does that. But I will say now, I'd much rather have that than this rioting that we have going on.
Right.
Because that's one thing I heard from some of one kid that was pretty into rioting, and he said, you know what? He said, you guys didn't listen to Colin Kaepernick. You called him names. You hated on him, and so now we're getting violent. It's like, right. It's just too bad.
Kind of take it from one thing to another.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I think about all that. So I think peaceful protesting, yes, and I think we should. Martin Luther King was a prime example. Look at the huge impact that he had from his peaceful protesting, and so I think it's been good, the peaceful protesting, and I've been encouraging those who have done it. I haven't gone and done it because I'm like, I don't know what's going on, and if I'm caught up in that, then people are going to think that I'm trying to be violent or riot, or I never know which is peaceful and which isn't.
Just see what they're doing.
I've been caught up.
Okay.
Maybe I should have done that, but I did encourage my one buddy and put that up on Facebook, and one of my other friends kind of slammed me for it, but I was encouraged that he was being peaceful.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, we're running out of time, and I don't want to take up too much time. So I'm just going to hit the last question.
I'm sorry, guys.
No, you're good. You went full passer on this. So
can't-
we're going to
yes,
start at this
exactly.
end, and we'll work to you.
He's like, "Oh, short-winded one."
So the last question, and again, just brief. How does the gospel speak to the issue of racism and police brutality?
Well, if it's mainly directed towards what's the issue, it's just trying to encourage as much peace and love that we can, because it's always easy to spew rage everywhere. Like you said, road rage is the quickest way to explain how that could just come like that, but it's harder to explain peacefulness and calm and get your words together and talk to people in a manner to avoid a lot of these issues. Like I said, a lot of these issues were started from a structure, a foundation that wasn't stable enough, which is, some of the police officers wasn't vetted enough to explain how to treat somebody as a human being. So with the church itself, is creating the foundation of being a human being to love people. And that's just what needs to happen. And the church is obviously what affects that.
Most definitely. You hit a key word, foundation. What's the foundation of our views? Is it in ourselves, or is it in what celebrities say? Is it in what people are saying on Facebook, or is it truly on the gospel? And as believers, we know what we've been saved from. TJ, you talked about it earlier. We all have that little bit of sin in us, that rage, that can go just like that. I can't say, hey, I'm better than that officer. I know that sounds strange to some people, but I can say, hey, I'm the chief of all sinners, because I've seen my sin and I've been in it and I invested in it. I can say that for myself.
And I guarantee that officer didn't wake up that morning and think, I'm gonna kill somebody today.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Right,
he probably never recognized the issues inside of his heart.
Exactly.
And never dealt with them.
Yep.
So then when the moment came, it just happened.
Yep.
So
this is the perfect opportunity to share the gospel with others. And most people probably won't accept it, but this is the perfect opportunity. This is the perfect segue. Why does evil like this happen in the world? Why is that allowed to go on? What did God do for guilty sinners like us? We've all been guilty of the same sin. And when we talked about, becoming Christians, becoming filled with the Spirit, now we're able to, be a part of the change, and loving people. But that starts with loving God. That's the first and greatest command, love God, with everything. Because if you don't love God, how can you truly love people? If you don't love God, how can you love His creation? You're going to look at His creation at a dim view. You're going to highlight some people, and you're going to look at some people down here. But being a believer, loving people is a byproduct of walking with Christ. It goes hand in hand. You can't divorce the two. You can't be a zealot over here and say, hey, I love God and I'm gonna live under a rock. But they work together in harmony. Thanks for that, Rich. They work together in harmony. And if we neglect one or the other, we're in danger of going back to that sin, returning to that vomit. Because I used to kind of look at sin. It's like, I messed up. And now I truly do look at it with disgust. I truly do. I don't want anything to do with it. And when I do sin, it ruins me, and I have to go repent. And I'm not saying that's good job or anything, humble brag or anything. I truly do mean that. So whenever I share the gospel with people, I realize you was just like me in that, and there's redemption. There's a way out of that. So, and that's for everybody, even the scum of the earth, as we would consider, So I'll just kind of leave it at that, because, I can go full pastor too, but.
So let's see. Let me rapid fire some points out, I guess, that stick out to me. One, as far as racism goes, we are all made in the image of God. We are all made from the dust of the earth. I released a message recently that talked about the fact that, we're different shades, but we're all shades of the exact same color wheel. We're all earth shades. So we're really the same color, just different hues of it, right? There really is no excuse for racism, because we're just hating on each other. We are, when it comes to authority, And I think like when you talk about police brutality, we're talking about brutality with the context of authority, hierarchy. And according to scripture, basically what we're told is if you have authority, if you have a position over somebody else, then you have to be above and beyond. Like you're called to be under stricter rules, tighter governance. You should be working harder to be like Jesus when you have that lifted up position. That's for teachers, political, whatever. If you have that authority, then you exercise it well. We should do all things in love. Like just underscore all, like no excuses. It's not all but, it's just all, period. So anything that you're doing in life that comes off as harsh, judgmental, lopsided, whatever, like you're already not practicing it, because the command is simple. Just do all things, whatever you do all things in love. And I think lastly, like just take from Jesus' example about how we get through this stuff, because we're talking about the protests and the fact that it hopefully leads to real discussions. And when you look at Jesus, like Jesus was the definition of somebody who belonged to this party, but instead chose to go break bread with somebody different than him, talk things out, meet them where they were at. And there was a conversation. And the way I view it, and I guess I can call out like men when we talk about sexism, and I'll call out white guys and white people when we're talking about racism. That means that we, especially as the majority party, we should be overly ready and willing to do what Jesus did. Go and meet people where they're at. Don't be like, I'm not racist. They can come talk to me if they want to. Like, get your butt out of your house and go meet some people and interact with folks different than you and see a different worldview. Because I will say, from a privileged perspective, if the world is already made for you, you don't understand different. Everything is already geared toward you. Go and figure out what somebody's other world is like so you can see what they're going through. And that's Jesus's example to me. And all of that being said, if you're going to have those conversations, if you're going to get into those kinds of discussions, both sides do what you can to go into it without an agenda. I love that this is sparking some discussions. I love that people are starting to talk about hard things. But there's going to be a lot of discussions that go nowhere because there's too many agendas being brought to the table where you're self-determined. Like, I've already pre-decided what my outcome is. I'm here to teach you something, not in reverse. And so there really is no discussion. It's just things being, thrown.
We got two for here, man. Let's get another chair.
Okay. What's going on, man? How we doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good.
Jesse Bates. Glad you guys could join us. Good to see you, Jesse.
Yeah, you too,
You
man.
doing, man?
Man, we didn't even come to hold you guys, okay? We just wanted to come to say, okay, if y'all leaving, we want to be part of it next time.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because we was at that Central Park thing, and after that, we didn't know they were going to eat, so they ended up eating. Well, we ended up talking. They were eating, and we left, okay? But we wanted to come, like I said, just to say, we're interested in being a part of the conversation. And whenever you all have another one, we plan to be here.
Okay.
Cool, man.
So we could definitely have
we can
a
do
part
another
two.
one, yeah,
we
part
didn't
two.
even get through all the questions.